The waves crashed against the shore as Mark stared at the small piece of paper in his trembling hands. Will you be my partner, in life and in business? Those 9 words, written in Sarah's elegant handwriting, blurred through his tears. How had they gone from barely tolerating each other in the office to this moment? Their journey from corporate rivals to soulmates began with a disaster that would ultimately become their salvation. If you're touched by this story of unexpected love and second chances, please hit that like button and subscribe to see more life-changing stories that remind us how fate works in mysterious ways. Mark Jenkins checked his watch for the 5th time in 10 minutes. The quarterly review meeting was scheduled to start in exactly 7 minutes, and his boss, Sarah Winters, was nowhere to be seen. As the financial director of Horizon Enterprises, Mark knew these meetings were sacred to Sarah. In the 3 years he'd worked under her, she had never been late, not once. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister, "Don't forget Lily's recital tonight at 7. She's been practicing for weeks." Mark's heart sank. Between the quarterly review and the stack of reports waiting on his desk, there was no way he'd make it to his daughter's performance. Since losing his wife to cancer 2 years ago, he'd been struggling to balance his career with raising their 8-year-old daughter alone. Each missed recital, each bedtime story cut short by an urgent email, they all weighed on him like stones. The conference room door swung open, and Sarah strode in with her characteristic purposeful gait. At 38, just 4 years older than Mark, she commanded the room with an effortless authority that both impressed and intimidated him. "Jenkins, I need you in my office after this meeting," she said without looking up from her tablet. "We have the Singapore client presentation to finalize." Mark's stomach tightened. "Ms. Winters, I actually have a personal commitment this evening that I can't." "The Singapore account is worth $17 million, Sarah cut him off, finally meeting his eyes. "Whatever it is, reschedule it." The meeting proceeded with its usual efficiency, but Mark barely heard a word. All he could think about was Lily's face when he called to tell her he wouldn't be there, again. By the time he followed Sarah into her office afterward, resentment simmered just beneath his professional veneer. "Before we start," he said, gathering his courage, "I need to explain that my daughter has a piano recital tonight. She's been practicing for months, and I promised I'd be there." Sarah paused, her expression unreadable. "Your daughter. Lily, right? How old is she now?" Mark was surprised she remembered his daughter's name. 8. "She's been through a lot since her mother died, and I'm trying my best not to let her down." Something flickered across Sarah's face, a momentary softening that vanished so quickly Mark thought he might have imagined it. "The Singapore presentation isn't until next week," she said finally. "I wanted to get ahead of it, but it can wait until tomorrow. Go to your daughter's recital." Mark blinked in surprise. "Thank you. I appreciate that. Don't look so shocked, Jenkins. I'm not completely heartless." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "But I do need you on the Singapore trip next month. It's just 3 days, and your work on their portfolio has been exceptional." That night, as Mark watched Lily's small fingers dance across the piano keys, he felt a mixture of pride and dread. 3 days away meant 3 days of imposing on his sister, who already did more than her fair share of helping with Lily. The corporate jet hummed steadily as it carried Mark, Sarah, and 3 other executives across the Pacific. Mark had spent most of the flight reviewing documents, occasionally glancing at Sarah, who was working with her usual intense focus. "You've been staring at the same page for 10 minutes, Sarah said without looking up. "Something on your mind, Jenkins?" Mark hesitated. "Just thinking about Lily. My sister's watching her, but she's got her hands full with her own kids." Sarah nodded, surprising him by closing her laptop. Tell me about her, Lily. For the next hour, Mark found himself sharing stories about his daughter, her love of piano, her struggle with math, how she still slept with the stuffed elephant his wife had given her. Sarah listened with unexpected attentiveness, occasionally asking questions that revealed she was genuinely interested. "You're doing a good job, you know," she said when he finally ran out of words. "Balancing everything can't be easy." "It's not," Mark admitted. "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing at both, being a father and being good at my job." "From what I've seen, you're excelling at both," Sarah said. "Though I understand the guilt. My father was a single parent too, after my mother left when I was 12. He worked 80-hour weeks to give me everything, but what I wanted most was just more time with him." It was the most personal thing Sarah had ever shared with him, and Mark was still processing this new side of his boss when the plane shuddered violently. The oxygen masks dropped as the cabin pressure changed suddenly. The last thing Mark remembered before everything went dark was reaching for his mask and seeing Sarah do the same, their eyes meeting in shared terror. Consciousness returned to Mark in painful increments. First came the sound, waves crashing rhythmically against a shore. Then sensation, sand beneath his body, the sting of salt water in cuts he didn't remember getting. Finally, sight, a blindingly blue sky above and, when he managed to turn his head, Sarah lying unconscious a few feet away. "Sarah!" His voice came out as a rasp. He crawled to her side, relief flooding through him when he saw her chest rising and falling steadily. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition. "Mark? What happened? Where are we?" "The plane," he said, memories returning in fragments. "There was turbulence, then." "I don't know. We must have crashed." They both sat up, taking in their surroundings. They were on a small beach, with dense jungle rising behind them. No sign of the plane, the other executives, or any human presence at all. "We need to find the others," Sarah said, attempting to stand but wincing as she put weight on her right ankle. Mark caught her before she fell. "You're hurt. Let me look." Her ankle was swollen but not broken. As Mark fashioned a makeshift bandage from a strip of his shirt, Sarah scanned the horizon. "No sign of rescue," she said quietly. "No sign of anyone." They spent that first day searching the beach for other survivors, but found only scattered debris from the plane, a seat cushion, a torn piece of the emergency exit door, Mark's carry-on bag that had somehow stayed intact. No sign of their colleagues. As night fell, they huddled under a makeshift shelter of palm fronds, the reality of their situation sinking in. "Lily," Mark whispered, staring into the small fire they'd managed to build. "She'll think I abandoned her, just like her mother did." "Her mother didn't abandon her," Sarah said gently. "She died." "That's different." "Not to an 8-year-old it isn't. Either way, the person you love doesn't come back." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "They'll find us, Mark. Your daughter won't lose you too." In the flickering firelight, with her corporate armor stripped away, Sarah looked different, vulnerable in a way Mark had never seen before. For the first time, he saw her not as his intimidating boss, but simply as a human being, just as scared as he was. Days turned into weeks. They established a routine. Mark would fish and collect coconuts while Sarah, whose ankle was slowly healing, maintained their camp and kept the signal fire burning. They learned to work together, their corporate hierarchy meaningless in this new reality where survival was the only performance metric that mattered. One evening, as they shared a meal of roasted fish, Sarah broke their comfortable silence. "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For taking care of me those first few days, when I could barely walk. For not giving up on finding food when we were both starving. She looked away, toward the horizon where the sun was setting in a spectacular display of orange and pink. I know I wasn't always the easiest boss to work for. Mark laughed softly. That's an understatement. The office nicknamed you the Ice Queen. Sarah's eyes widened. They did not. They absolutely did. Though never to your face, obviously. To his surprise, she laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound he'd never heard from her before. Well, I suppose I earned it. I've always believed that to succeed as a woman in business, I couldn't show any weakness. Is that why you pushed everyone so hard? Including yourself? She nodded, absently tracing patterns in the sand. My father sacrificed everything to give me opportunities. I couldn't waste them by being anything less than perfect. Perfection is overrated, Mark said. Trust me, I've been trying to be the perfect father since Lisa died, and all it's done is exhaust me. You talk about Lily all the time, but you rarely mention your wife, Sarah observed. Mark was quiet for a long moment. It still hurts. Lisa was everything. We met in college, built our whole lives around each other. When she got sick, it happened so fast. 6 months from diagnosis to the end. I still don't know how to exist in a world without her. You're doing it right now, Sarah said softly. Every day, you're figuring it out. Under different circumstances, if they weren't stranded, if she weren't his boss, Mark might have interpreted the look in her eyes as something more than compassion. But that was impossible. Wasn't it? A month into their isolation, a tropical storm hit the island. They huddled in the more substantial shelter they'd built, listening to the wind howl and the rain pound against the palm fronds. I'm scared, Sarah admitted, her voice barely audible above the storm. Mark reached for her hand in the darkness. Me too. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers intertwined with his. If we don't make it off this island. We will, Mark interrupted. But if we don't, she persisted, I don't want to die with regrets. With things left unsaid. The shelter shook violently as a particularly strong gust hit it. Sarah moved closer to Mark, and he instinctively put his arm around her. What things? He asked. That I admire you, Mark. Not just as an employee, but as a person. The way you talk about Lily, the way you've never given up hope here, you're the strongest person I've ever met. In the dim light, her face was inches from his. For a moment, Mark forgot about the storm, about being stranded, about everything except the woman in front of him. Sarah, The roof of their shelter tore away, exposing them to the full fury of the storm. They scrambled to their feet, grabbing what supplies they could as rain lashed at them. The cave. Mark shouted over the wind, pointing to a small opening in the rocks they'd discovered but never needed to use. They ran, hand in hand, through the driving rain to the relative safety of the cave. Soaked and shivering, they huddled together for warmth. What were you going to say? Sarah asked once they'd caught their breath. Before the roof collapsed. Mark looked at her, really looked at her. Her hair was plastered to her face, her clothes were soaked, and she'd never looked more beautiful to him. I was going to say that you've changed everything for me. The way I see you, the way I see myself. And it terrifies me. Why? Because when we get rescued, and we will get rescued, we go back to being boss and employee. We go back to our real lives. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. What if I don't want to go back to exactly the way things were? Before Mark could respond, a deafening crack of thunder shook the cave, and a section of the ceiling gave way. Mark lunged forward, pushing Sarah out of the way as rocks crashed down where she had been sitting. Pain exploded in his leg as a boulder pinned him to the ground. The last thing he heard before losing consciousness was Sarah screaming his name. Mark drifted in and out of awareness. Sometimes he heard Sarah's voice, felt her cool hand on his forehead. Other times there was only darkness and pain. When he finally regained full consciousness, he found his leg splinted with branches and wrapped in leaves. "You're awake," Sarah said, relief evident in her voice. She knelt beside him, offering water from a coconut shell. "You've been in and out for 2 days. I was worried about infection, but the fever broke last night." "You saved me," Mark said, his voice hoarse. "You saved me first," she replied with a small smile. "The boulder would have crushed me if you hadn't pushed me away." As Mark recovered, their relationship deepened. The near-death experience had stripped away their final reservations. They talked about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Sarah confessed that despite her success, she was lonely. Mark admitted that even before the crash, he'd been drowning in grief and responsibility. One night, as they sat watching the stars, Sarah turned to him. "I've been thinking about what happens when we get rescued." "And?" Mark asked, his heart beating faster. "And I don't want to be your boss anymore." Mark felt a stab of disappointment. "I understand. After everything that's happened between us, it would be complicated." "That's not what I meant," Sarah said, taking his hand. "I want to restructure the company. I've been CEO for 5 years, and all it's brought me is ulcers and loneliness. I want to create a co-CEO position. For you." Mark stared at her in disbelief. "Me? But you have the financial expertise the company needs, and I've seen firsthand how you handle crisis situations. We make a good team, Mark. In every way." She leaned forward and kissed him softly. When she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes. "I never thought I'd find this," she whispered. "Especially not here, of all places." Mark touched her face gently. "I thought I'd had my one chance at love. I never imagined I could feel this way again." They fell asleep in each other's arms, no longer boss and employee, but partners in the truest sense of the word. The rescue came on their 47th day on the island. A fishing boat spotted their signal fire and radioed for help. As the rescue helicopter descended, Mark and Sarah stood hand in hand on the beach. "Ready to go home," the rescue worker shouted over the roar of the rotors. Mark looked at Sarah, who squeezed his hand and nodded. "More than ready," he called back. The reunion with Lily was everything Mark had dreamed of during their isolation. His daughter flung herself into his arms, sobbing with joy. His sister stood nearby, tears streaming down her face. "I knew you'd come back, Daddy," Lily said between sobs. "I played piano every day so you could hear me wherever you were." Mark held her tightly, his own tears falling freely. "I heard you, sweetheart. I heard you every day." Sarah hung back, giving them space for their reunion. But Lily, ever perceptive, noticed her. "Are you my daddy's boss?" she asked, approaching Sarah cautiously. Sarah knelt down to Lily's level. "I used to be. Now I'm his friend." Lily studied her for a moment, then asked with the directness only children possess, "Do you make my daddy stay late at work?" Sarah smiled. "Not anymore. In fact, I'm going to make sure he has plenty of time for piano recitals from now on." That seemed to satisfy Lily, who took Sarah's hand with surprising ease. "Then you can be my friend too." The transition back to civilization wasn't easy. There were medical examinations, debriefings, and the painful task of attending memorial services for their 3 colleagues whose bodies had eventually been recovered from the ocean. The board of directors was initially skeptical about Sarah's proposal to make Mark co-CEO, but her determination won them over. 6 months after their rescue, Horizon Enterprises announced its new leadership structure, with Sarah focusing on operations and client relations while Mark handled finance and strategy. Their personal relationship progressed more cautiously. Mark was careful to give Lily time to adjust to Sarah's presence in their lives. They had dinner together once a week, then twice. Sarah helped Lily with her math homework. Mark taught Sarah how to make Lisa's famous chocolate chip pancakes on Sunday mornings. 1 year to the day after their rescue, Mark took Sarah back to the beach, not their island, but a peaceful stretch of shoreline near the city. As the sun set, painting the sky in colors that reminded them both of their time together on the island, he dropped to one knee. "Sarah Winters, being stranded with you was the worst thing that ever happened to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It showed me that life can begin again, even